Hello, everyone, and welcome to our game design webinar. Thank you very, very much for joining us. It is currently 8:30 a.m. here on a Friday morning in Singapore, and I'm excited to be here with everyone. Now, this is the first time I've used this webinar platform, so before we get started, I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. If you can somebody just type in the comments at the side that you can hear and everything is all good. Also, while we're waiting, thanks, Rowan. So sounds good, video's good. Like I mentioned, just before we get started, we'd love to know who's here watching and where they're from. So just in the comments at the side there, if you could just say who you are, where you're from, what you teach. I can see that Chia Chow Ming is here watching from a teacher training. Rowan Turner's here from Hong Kong. I can see there's about 30 people in here at the moment. But yeah, feel free to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. And then we'll get started very, very soon with our game design webinar. Just so you know as well, at the bottom of the screen underneath the video, you might see questions, polls, and offers. If you click on those three tabs at the bottom there, it's going to give you an option to ask a question. That's going to sort of come through to me, and I'm going to be able to answer those questions. There will be time for question and answers at the end of the presentation. So if you want to put those in there, I'll try and answer them at the end. The polls function is there. In case I want to ask any questions of you, you can sort of answer there. And then offers, we'll be adding an offer at the end of the webinar, so you'll be able to see it there and access it. All right, looks like we've got a few more people. We've got Jen Bendel from Georgia. We've got Quentin from WA. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming. Just give another maybe 1 minute for people who are arriving to come on in, and then we will get started with our presentation. Jill from Barrington, Illinois. Sherry from Kamloops, BC. Hey, BC, I'm going to be moving there in a month or so. So looking forward to being there. All right, so now that we've got a few people in, let's get ourselves started with this game design webinar. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen with you so that you can see the presentation, and then we'll be good to go. All right, so welcome, guys, to the game design webinar today. I want to spend about 30 to 40 minutes with you talking about game design, the way that we can design games for our students in physical education in a very purposeful and meaningful way. Before we do get started, for those of you that don't know me, obviously, if you found your way here, you probably do know me and you have heard of me before, but my name is Nathan Horn, originally from Tasmania. In Australia, I went to the University of Tasmania, where I studied a Bachelor of Human Movement for 4 years, majoring in physical education. Then, soon after graduating, moved to the UK, taught for a couple of years there in a special needs school. Shortly after that, moved to Cambodia and taught in an international school there. Milan, Italy for a couple of years. Singapore for the past 5 years, and my time in Singapore is coming to an end, and I will be soon moving to Canada with my wife and my child. And we will be starting a new life there. So very, very exciting times. I've had a very varied background, but also really excited about what the future holds for me in terms of my career and my family. Currently, I am a physical educator at ISS International School in Singapore. I have been there for 5 years. I teach elementary school physical education, and I'm also the head of student welfare and enrichment. And when I move to Canada, I will be taking a position at Meadow Ridge School in Maple Ridge, just outside of Vancouver, where I'll be teaching again elementary physical education, and I'll be the head of department for the physical education department of the school. So I'm super excited about that. I run the website iPhys-Ed.com, and I'm guessing if you found your way here to this webinar, you've been to that website before. If you haven't, make sure you check it out. And I'm lucky enough to take part in 2 podcasts. One is the Phys-Ed podcast with my good friend Joey Fife from the Pedagogical.com. And the other one is the Fundamental Movement podcast, which I take part in with Andy Vassley, Dean Dudley, and Aaron Beatley, and a wide range of other guests. And we talk about all things physical education and really get a point of view from academics and practicing teachers. Finally, something new that we've started is the squad. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment about what the squad is and how you can join that if you're interested in doing that. So our new initiative is the squad, which is a physical education online coaching community, which is hosted on Slack. The idea was that I want to be able to help as many people as I can, or as many physical education teachers as I can. And I've been really lucky to go to a number of different conferences and be able to present workshops all around the world. Having a brand new family, so my daughter is currently 7 weeks old. I'm not going to have the opportunity to be able to travel as much as I have in the past, but I still want to be able to help people. So by setting up this online community, I am able to help people in that way, and especially in ways like this webinar, for example. So this webinar that's being run now is one of the free monthly webinars that will take place as part of the Slack community. So if you join the squad, you're going to get access to monthly webinars just like this. You're going to get one-on-one coaching with me and free premium resources and community support. I'll talk a little bit more about the squad later, but if you are interested in joining the waitlist for that, you can go to iPhys-Ed.com/squad and join the waitlist. We have about 12 people as a part of the squad at the moment. We're looking to add about 8 more at the moment to get to 20 on our wait list, and then we'll close it for a little while and then we'll open it up again later into the year. There is my school, ISS International School. You can see my teaching space there. It's my gym. It's outdoors. It's very hot here in Singapore. So I'm not blessed to have the most fantastic facilities. So that means that types of activities that I need to run, or the flexibility that I need to have within my teaching is really large. I need to be able to adjust on the fly depending on the weather, depending on different factors. And so being able to design games in a way that's really meaningful for the students is really important when you have facilities that are like this. So that's my current school. Here's where I'll be heading in about a month to Canada. Fantastic school, fantastic facilities, beautiful, beautiful landscape. Really, really excited about heading to Meadow Ridge School. So before we get started today, I want to think about the purpose of physical education, because generally the practice of physical education is focused primarily on the transmission of decontextualized sports techniques to large classes of children who possess a range of interests and abilities. If you think about the type of skill and drill activities that generally have taken place in physical education classrooms over the past 20 to 50 years, this is probably what you're seeing. Decontextualized techniques, learning skills, large groups, and those large groups of children have a real range of interests and abilities. And research tells us that learning rarely moves beyond introductory levels. So if I'm thinking about the amount of time that I have with my students, you know, on any given day, the students maybe are awake for 12 hours. They spend 7 of those hours at school. And if they're really, really lucky, they might get 1 hour of PE in each of those days. Over the course of a week, that comes up to about maybe 2 hours of PE in a week if they're lucky. And over the course of a year, you're looking at about 76 hours of PE or direct contact time with your students. Now, if you have a class of 20 students, that only comes out to 3 hours and 48 minutes per student per year direct contact that you are having as a teacher with that student. So really, when I look at those statistics, I start to think about how am I using that time really purposefully? How am I making sure that what I'm doing with the students when I have them is really purposeful and it's helping them to learn? Because it's not good enough for me just to think about wanting the kids to be active. I want them to learn. I want them to be able to have those knowledge, skills, and understandings to be able to live and develop themselves as individuals so that they can be active participants in their community. So if we look at the quality physical education guidelines that were put out by UNESCO, it talks about 3 things. It talks about physical activity, talks about sport, and it talks about quality physical education, and it really differentiates between the 3. If we're talking about physical activity, we're just talking about any movement that uses energy. If we're talking about sport, we're talking about all forms of activity that contribute to fitness, well-being, and social interaction, whether it's play, recreation, whether it's organized, casual, or competitive, general sport. Now, if we look at physical education curriculums around the world, you'll see a lot of sport and you'll see a lot of physical activity in the form of fitness. If we want to really think about quality physical education and making what we're doing purposeful, we want to make sure that it's planned, progressive, and inclusive, so that it acts as the foundation for lifelong engagement in physical activity and sport, that it's developmentally appropriate, and it gives students the skills they need to lead a physically active life. I think the most important part of that statement there is developmentally appropriate. We're talking about game design today. We're really talking about how can we create games within our physical education classrooms that are developmentally appropriate to the age of the students that we have and the skill level that they have. Anytime we're thinking about designing learning as a whole, I think really it starts with assessment. It starts with an assessment of where are my students at right now? What skills do they have? What knowledge do they have? What understanding do they have? And what do they need to be able to progress, to improve? Once I know that, then I can begin planning and think about how I can help them to achieve the outcomes that I want them to do. If I know that I want them to be able to achieve a certain outcome and I've assessed their ability at that level, then I can start planning activities that are going to help them to achieve that outcome. Once I've done that, then I'm thinking about how can I actually put those activities into practice? What am I actually going to do in my class, in my lessons, to make sure that the students are able to achieve those outcomes? Once I've put that into practice, then it just cycles back to assessment. I'm assessing again. I'm thinking, where are my students at and what do they need, so that I can then plan future activities and then put them into practice and then continue that assessment cycle. It doesn't have to be formal assessment. A lot of the time it can be informal assessment, just observations by you as the teacher, seeing what's happening with your students and then making changes in terms of what you're doing with the students and putting that into practice. So really, I think the guiding question of what we want to look at today is, how can we make games more purposeful in physical education? I think really we need to stop thinking about what we're doing in terms of games. What game are we playing today? And start thinking more about how we're going to play the game and why it is that the games that we're playing are important in our lessons. I think it comes back to this idea of flow theory that was proposed by, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that name. If anyone thinks that they can do it, please let me know. Csikszentmihalyi, I think he's a Czech researcher, and he talked about flow theory and the idea of video games. So he talks about video games having an element of challenge and an element of needing skill. And he talks about flow theory as being the difference between anxiety and boredom. If a game has a low level of challenge and a low level of skill, then people are going to be bored. If it has a high level of challenge and a high level of skill needed, then it may create a level of anxiety. So what we're really looking for, or video game creators looking for when they're creating games, is that flow channel, that area in between the level of challenge and the level of skill needed. If you can find the appropriate level of challenge and the appropriate level of skill, then the game is going to be fun. If we think about the types of games that we're creating in PE contexts, same thing. If the challenge of the game is too high for the students, then it's going to be too hard. If the level of skill needed by the students is going to be too high or too low, it's going to be too easy. We need to find that flow. Okay, and that's where I think good game design sits, finding the appropriate level of challenge for the students and the appropriate level of skill needed for them to be able to achieve that challenge. We talk about game-centered approaches or models that align to teaching games. We're probably talking about game sense and teaching games for understanding. They're very, very similar. They just have a couple of very minute differences. If you haven't heard of the teaching games for understanding model, basically what it does is it creates, it puts the game play at the center, and it goes away from that traditional model of teaching skills and then playing games. It starts by allowing students to play games, and then the teacher's formatively assessing. It talks about game appreciation, developing tactical awareness, making appropriate decisions of what to do and knowing how to do it. Talks about skill execution and then performance, and it's a bit of a cycle. If we're talking about game sense, it's a little bit simpler. Game sense really can be broken down into the idea of decision making and movement knowledge coming together to allow students to have movement capability. If students know what to do and they know how to do it, then theoretically they should be able to do it. All games fall within these pedagogical principles. Now, there are 4 pedagogical principles of games that I'm going to share with you today, and I'm going to show you some examples of those as we work through them. So the first is sampling. If we're thinking about sampling games, we're trying to think about selecting as many games from the same category as we can to develop an understanding of similar tactical problems and solutions. Now, a lot of games, especially if you're familiar with the teaching games for understanding model, invasion games, striking and fielding games, all of the games within those categories have very, very similar tactical problems or tactical issues that players may face throughout the game. So by allowing students to take part in a wide variety of those types of games, once they understand the tactical problems and solutions within one area of one of those games, they're better able then to use that knowledge and transfer it across into other games. Then it just becomes about the skill. Can they develop the skills to be able to play baseball as opposed to cricket? If they understand the tactical issues that they may face in cricket, they're going to face similar tactical issues in baseball. Then they just need to worry about the skills and executing those skills rather than thinking really deeply about what they need to do. So the first pedagogical principle is sampling. The second is representation. Representation, we're talking about lead-up games that are developmentally appropriate. There's that word again that we were talking about earlier, making sure that the games are appropriate to the level of the students. And the games are appropriate to how a skill or tactical solution can be used in the game. And I'll give you an example of this once we get through these pedagogical principles. The next pedagogical principle of games is exaggeration. So thinking about how we can exaggerate certain aspects of games to create a specific focus in terms of a tactical solution. So whether it's playing on a long, narrow area to recognize the need to open space up for an attack, whether it's changing the size of the equipment, or whether it's changing the number of students playing, there are a variety of different things that we can do. And again, we'll explore this in a moment. And finally is tactical complexity. So a progression of tactical solutions that progress from simple to complex. So enabling students to start with the most basic version of a game and then working their way through making a game more and more complex as you go through. And again, like I said, I'll explain a little bit about this as we go through in a moment. So if we're talking about sampling, we're talking about sampling games from those categories that I mentioned earlier. So if it's target games, bowling, darts, archery, bocce, curling, striking and fielding, cricket, rounders, baseball, softball, invasion games, football, the variety of football codes, whether it's rugby, Australian football, American football, Gaelic football, basketball, rugby, hockey, lacrosse, and net and ball games, so tennis, badminton, volleyball, spikeball, foursquare, squash. So all of the games that are within each of those categories have very similar tactical problems. For example, in invasion games, a lot of those games require players to find space and to use space effectively to be able to score points. So theoretically, if players understand how to do that in one of those sports, then they should be able to transfer that understanding into one of the other sports. So if we're thinking about sampling, we're talking about trying to enable students to try as many of those different sports within that category as possible. So when I teach sports within my physical education curriculum, I'm not teaching a unit of basketball or a unit of cricket or a unit of tennis. I'm teaching a unit of invasion games. And often what we'll do is we'll change sports and change activities and change games very regularly within that unit, whether it's from week to week, even within lessons, so that students are having to use the knowledge that they have and being able to transfer that knowledge across different sports. Talking about sampling and tactical complexity combined, and we'll talk more about tactical complexity a little bit later, But the idea that in terms of those categories, that target games, especially unopposed target games like golf, bowling, archery, and darts, are at the most basic level of game. It doesn't require any sort of outside interference. It's you as an individual trying to achieve a certain purpose. And then that level of complexity or the difficulty increases as you go through up to invasion games like soccer, basketball, hockey, rugby, because there are so many moving pieces, there are so many players, there are so many different scenarios that can happen, that it does really require players to think more about the game as opposed to those unopposed games at the bottom of that taxonomy, where it is really just, can you execute that skill as an individual within that game? Okay, I want to think about representation and an exaggeration. I'm going to give you some examples of that right now. So if I'm thinking about representation, if I want to represent a net and wall game, essentially all I need is an object, whether it's a ball, and something to separate two players. It could be a skipping rope on the ground. So within my lessons, if I want to play a net wall game like tennis or badminton or volleyball, spike ball, anything like that, really essentially I don't need a lot of equipment. The types of things that are going to be happening if I have my students playing a game like this are going to be the same sort of things that are going to be happening to students playing a game like tennis or badminton. If I'm asking my students to try and make the ball go over the skipping rope and bounce twice before their partner catches it, they're trying to solve the same sort of problems that a tennis player or a badminton player may face. I can also exaggerate the game. So what I might do is I might include a boundary now. And I might make that boundary very short but very wide. And it's going to encourage the students now to throw the ball to the sides, because that's where the open space is. And again, they're solving problems. They're solving the type of problem of, how do I get my partner or get my opponent out? How can I make it so that my opponent can't catch the ball? I'll throw it to the space. Then it gets students thinking about the idea of needing to get back to the center spot, moving side to side in good court positioning. I can also exaggerate the game by making it long and narrow, and now we're looking at deep shots and short shots, trying to get our opponents out. So the way that I exaggerate rules within a game, boundaries within the game, equipment within a game, can really enable students to think about different tactical problems that they're going to face within those games or sports in different ways. We're thinking about tactical complexity. What we're talking about is we want to match the game to the developmental level of the student. And it's like we spoke about earlier, that it's really important that, I'm sure if you've taught games before in your lessons and it's been a bit of a failure, it's probably been because either the game is too easy for the students or it's too hard. We really want it to be at the level that they're at, and to offer them just a little bit of challenge before we try and make it more difficult. So the idea of tactical complexity is really like a ladder. We start with a very basic tactical problem at the bottom of the ladder. When students can make an appropriate solution, then we're going to add an additional problem. When they solve that, we'll add a more complex problem. When they solve that, we'll add a more complex problem, and it keeps going like this. The interesting thing about this is that you can have students working or playing a game within your class that are working at different levels. So they may be working at, one student may be working at a basic problem, trying to solve a basic problem, and other students may be working on more complex problems because they're able to do that. An example of this might be if you're playing basketball, you may have some students who really, really find it difficult to dribble the ball. So you might just have them playing the game where they don't need to dribble the ball when they have it. They can run with the ball, or they need to stand still with the ball before they pass it. Whereas you can have other students who are able to dribble the ball, and now that they're using that more complex skill, they're doing it. It does take a little bit of training for your students to be able to feel like that. They'll say it's not fair. But it's really about, like I said, making sure they're matching the game to the level of the student. And not all of your students are the same. They're going to have different skills and different understanding. So if you can create games where you can have students working at different levels within that game, then really I think you're doing a very, very good job of differentiating for your students. So if we're thinking about tactical complexity within games, I'll give you an example of target games here. So really within target games, there's two things that we're trying to do. We're trying to either score points or we're trying to prevent the other team from scoring. If we're trying to score points, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the object close to the target, within a close proximity to the target. And there's three things that we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to aim, we need to be able to place the object, and maybe we need to be able to add some spins and turns to the object to get it to where we want it to go. We need to avoid obstacles, so we need to have accuracy. We need to be able to use other objects or obstacles, and we need to be able to communicate if we're working in a team. And finally, at the highest level is if we can sometimes create a dynamic reaction. So can I use my object to hit another object and move that into a spot, or move my object into a spot by hitting it with another object? That is a bit more tactically complex. So you can see as it sort of goes through is we're working from trying to get the object just close to the target. Maybe now we're trying to avoid the obstacles, and now we're using those obstacles to help us. On the other end, if we're trying to prevent scoring, we're trying to defend space by taking other objects out, by knocking them, or placing objects as guards. And then at another level is getting a last shot. So a lot of target games, if you win that round, then you get to have the first turn in the next round, or have the last shot in the next round. Same thing within striking and fielding games, or invasion games, or net wall games as well. There are a number of tactical problems that you're going to work through. So in a striking and fielding game, at the very basic level, can you hit the ball accurately? Can you hit it between fielders? What sort of height and force do you need on the ball? Where are you going to hit it into the field? Just going to answer a quick question. Thomas, is there a replay? Yes, there'll be a replay available, so you should get it in your email. So if you need to rush off, you'll be able to catch up with us a little bit later on. The next level is, as a fielding team, can you make hitting the ball difficult in terms of the way that you pitch the ball or bowl the ball? Can you avoid getting out? Are you able to score runs? And can you stop scoring runs? Same thing in net wall games. Can you be consistent? Can you get the ball back and forth across the net or into the opponent's space? Are you able to set up for an attack? Are you able to defend space? Are you able to win the point? And can you defend against attack? So as you can see, in all of these game categories, there are a number of things that you can work on with your students to start them at a level where it's going to be appropriate for them. So start with, in terms of net wall, we're going to start with consistency. Can you get the ball back and forward? Are you able to set up for an attack now? Okay, someone's trying to beat you. Can you defend the space that you have on your side? How are you going to win a point? How are you going to defend against somebody attacking against you? So these types of things, the graphics can definitely help you in terms of your teaching, and they can also help your students. I have a question here from Jen Bendel, and she says, do you share this graphic with your students? Yes, I do. We have these printed out and we have these displayed up. But often what I'll do is as well, I'll just use it as a reference to show them, okay, here's what we're working on today. We're working on consistency. And here are the things that you need to think about. You need to think about positioning. You need to think about footwork, skill mechanics, and accuracy. All of these resources are available at the end of the webinar. I'll show you where you can access these resources. So if we go back to designing games, it really, like I mentioned earlier, it comes down to planning, assessment, and practice. If I have good planning and I know what I'm looking for in terms of my assessment, then hopefully I can put that into practice. If I know what I want my students to achieve, I know how I will know if they have achieved it, then I can start planning activities and experiences for those students and putting them into practice. I think often as teachers, I think we need to think of ourselves almost like doctors sometimes in terms of what's happening in our lessons. If we've designed a game or we're playing a game with our students, if we think like a doctor, what we really want to do is we want to diagnose what's happening within the game. What am I noticing about the game right now? Is it too hard? Is it too easy? What's happening with certain players? Here's where I'm making, here's where I'm making those sort of anecdotal observances as a teacher. What's actually happening in front of me while students are playing? Once I've noticed what's happening, then I can respond just like a doctor would. A doctor would diagnose a medical issue, and then they respond by creating some sort of treatment plan, whether it's by sort of offering drugs or offering surgery or offering rest, things like that. Once they know what the problem is, then they can respond. So same as a teacher, if we can recognize what sort of problems are happening within games or what sort of issues students are facing within games within our classes, then we can make appropriate responses and change things. Once we've done that, then we're going back and we're evaluating. Okay, so I changed a rule, or I changed the equipment, or I changed the way the game was being played. Did it make the game better? Did it enable the students to be able to develop their skills and understanding in a way that they weren't able to do before? There are a couple of frameworks that exist out there that can help you with this. One of them is the problem diagnosis framework, which comes from Growing Young Movers. And I'll give you an example. So for an example, in invasion games, here are some of the potential problems that you might experience or you might see happen within a game. One might be that the players, we're thinking, are players able to score? If they're not able to score, is it because they're having trouble keeping the ball? Is it because they're having trouble getting behind the defense? Or is it a problem where they just can't shoot? They're not able to get the ball into the hoop or into the goal. If that is the case, then there are some different instructional focuses that we can work on. So if the students are having difficulty being able to keep the ball in their team, then we need to really think about possession. So we'll go back and we'll do some instructional activities where we're thinking about how can we control the ball, what sort of things do we need to do to develop our passing and receiving, and how can we support our teammates. If they're having problems getting behind the defense, they just can't seem to get the ball where they need to get it to be able to score, then we need to think about penetration. And again, how can we use the ball in terms of passing and receiving and supporting our teammates to be able to penetrate the defense? And then again, if they're having difficulty scoring, then we need to go back and do some shooting instruction and help them to develop their shooting skills so that they're able to be successful within that game. Another problem that you might experience in an invasion game is that players aren't able to prevent scoring, that one team is scoring too easily. It could be for a number of reasons. It could be because they're not covering opponents, they're not able to win the ball back, or they're not defending the goal effectively. So again, there are some instructional focuses in terms of marking and cover, winning the ball back, and being able to goal keep or being able to transition between attack and defense to make sure that you're being an effective defender. So this is just one example of a problem diagnosis framework. Like I said, it comes from Growing Young Movers. And at the end, I'll show you where you can get those resources. And there are problem diagnosis frameworks for each of the teaching games for understanding categories. So net wall games, invasion games, striking fielding games, and target games. So you'll be able to look at those and see some of the common problems that happen within those games. Another framework is the Change It framework that comes out of the Sporting Schools Australia program. And I really, really like this one. And I think it's really easy to use. And I like the way that it breaks it down. So it talks about allowing students to play a game and you as a teacher observing. And what you're looking at is some of these things. Is the purpose of the game being achieved? Are all players engaged? Are players coping with the skills required? Is it safe? Are players enjoying the game? Do the players understand the game? And is really importantly, is the game working, or does it appear too hard, too easy, or too one-sided? Once you've observed, it's going to give you three options. Okay, if you've noticed that the game is too easy, it's probably that players are not challenged enough. Both sides are scoring often with little effort. The skills required are too easily performed, and there's really little interest or motivation. If you notice this, what you need to do is you need to change the game up. What can you do? You can add rules that increase the difficulty. You can set the challenge to make it more difficult to score, increase team sizes, decrease the area of gameplay to make it more difficult for attackers. So there's a few different things you can do if you're noticing that games are too easy for your students. If you're noticing that games are too hard for your students, they're having difficulty because they can't score, there's poor level of possession, they're not able to execute skills, and there's, again, little interest or motivation. Rather than changing it up, you need to change it down. Simplify the rules to make the game easier, change the equipment to make it easier to use with skills, change the way that you score. Maybe it's if you're playing basketball, they can't get the ball high enough, take the hoop away, make them score in a different way. Maybe it's just passing to somebody to be able to score. Vary the area of the playing, the size of the playing area, and then create more games with fewer players. That's where you get into this small-sided games. You know, rather than having a game of 11-side soccer, create 3 5-a-side games. allow students to have more opportunity to use the ball. The other thing you might notice is that it's too one-sided, that one team is dominating, some players are not getting a turn, and again, still little interest or motivation. So whether the game's too easy, too hard, or too one-sided, often what you'll notice is students are not interested. They're not interested in playing. They have very, very little motivation. If this happens, you do need to change the game. You're not going to change it up. You're not going to change it down, but you are going to change it. You're going to shuffle the teams to make them more balanced, introduce additional rules for the dominant side. So it might be, okay, the dominant side, you now need to pass the ball to 5 people before you can score. Or you need to make sure that every person in the team touches the ball before you can score. You can introduce zoned areas for dominant players. So if you have 1 or 2 players that are dominating the game, okay, make them defenders. Now they have to stay in the defensive side of the field, or make them attackers. Give them constraints within the game to make sure that they're not able to dominate and affect the entire game situation, or create game scenario challenges. So you might say to the attacking team, okay, or the dominant team, okay, you're up by this many points. By the end of the game, you need to have done this, or you're now down by 7 points. You've got 2 minutes to get 7 points, and see if they're able to achieve that. So again, like I said, I really enjoy this change it framework, where you're thinking about, is it too easy, too hard, or too one-sided, and then either changing the game up, changing it down, or changing it altogether. So the change it framework talks about changing the coaching style, changing how you score or win, changing the area, changing the numbers of players, changing the game rules, changing the type of equipment, making sure the game is inclusive for everybody, and changing the amount of time that's being played. So like I said in that previous slide about changing it up, changing it down, or changing it, here are all the different things that you can change about a game to help the game to become more developmentally appropriate for the students. But essentially, the most important part of all of this is just to think about, if it's not working, the game's not working, change it. Change it in some way to make sure that it is working. I'm sure all of us have been out there, me included, a number of times, where I've been playing a game that I thought was really fantastic for my students, and it just didn't work. It wasn't working at all. So what I needed to do was I needed to change something about the game, and it may have been a small change or a big change, but once that change was made, the game worked much better. Students were enjoying the game, and they were really able to develop their skills, their knowledge, and their understanding about how to be successful players within that game. I noticed that we've got Jared, the PE geek, is here with us right now. So welcome, Jared. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I want to give you an example of how I might take a learning outcome and break that down into levels and actually teach that. And I'm going to show you how I created a game, or create games to help students to achieve these learning outcomes. So the learning outcome was applying basic offensive and defensive strategies and tactics in invasion, small-sided practice tasks. So what I've done is I've broken that learning outcome down, and I learned how to do this from the amazing Terry Drain and Joey Fife. There's a number of resources on Joey's website, the Physical Educator, where you can find out about how to do this in more detail. But essentially what you're doing is you're circling the verb, which is apply, and you're underlining the content block. So I want to see, can students apply offensive strategies and offensive tactics, and can they apply defensive strategies and defensive tactics? Once I've done that, I've broken that down even further. Okay, what does it mean to be able to apply an offensive strategy? It means being able to maintain possession, being able to avoid defensive players, being able to create space for teammates, create space for yourself, attack the goal. All of these things now can become instructional focuses for me, and they can also become assessment pieces. Okay, can I assess a student? Are they able to avoid defensive players? Are they able to create space for themselves? Can they attack the goal? Do they know how to defend? And I'll talk more about assessment in one of our upcoming future webinars, where we'll really drill down into how we can assess students really meaningfully against learning outcomes. All right, so once I know what my learning outcome is, I want to put it into practice. So if I want to know, can students apply basic offensive and defensive strategies and tactics in invasion small-sided practice tasks, really what I want to look at is 4 things right now. I want to look at, can they maintain possession? Can they regain possession? Can they create space? And can they defend space? And I'm going to show you how I created a game and built that game up using tactical complexity, making it more and more difficult as we went on to help my students to understand these concepts. Here's a photo of my students playing the game. We call it bench ball or end ball. You can see a student standing there on a blue block at the end of the court on both ends. Basically, the blue team need to get the ball to that person and have them catch it without that person stepping off the blue block. If they can do that, they'll score a point. So at its most basic form, this game is really about maintaining possession. Can your team keep control of the object and the ball and pass it within your team to be able to get it to that person? So what I want to look at is, can students maintain possession of an object? So at a very basic level, all we're having students do as the first activity is pass the ball backwards and forwards between themselves to make sure that they can throw and catch. About short passes, and it's about communication. So what I'm doing as a teacher at this point is I'm walking around and I'm looking which students are able to catch and throw easily, which students are having difficulty, and I'm able to then give those students that are having difficulty that one-on-one instruction time to help them to develop their throwing and catching skills. Once I've done that, we're going to look onto the next level, which is going to be layer 2 or level 2, which is, again, we're still looking at maintaining possession in terms of short passes and communication. This time I want students to be moving as they do it. So after they pass, they're moving. So they're sort of being introduced to the game space where they're going to be playing, and now they're passing to anybody. Again, which students are having difficulty, which students are able to pass and catch and on the move rather than stationary. And again, as a teacher, I'm then able to go and help those students that need help. Layer 3, now students have had an opportunity to think about maintaining possession. We're now thinking about how we can create space. So now what I've done is I've split my students into 2 teams within the game space. However, at this point, they're not against each other. They're still working together as a team. And their challenge now is to work together as a team to get through the game space without dropping the ball. So what they're doing is they're moving into space, and then they're passing, throwing, and catching. If the ball hits the ground, the players have to go back to the start and try again. If they're able to make it to the other end without dropping the ball, they score a point, and they just go back and forward as many times as they can within the given time limit. So by having both teams work within the same space at the same time, it really gets students thinking about that spatial awareness. Okay, where do they need to go to be able to get the ball easily? Where is the space within the court when there are this many people playing? Especially with elementary school students or young students, it's really difficult to get them to spread out. And by doing this, I think before going into a oppositional sort of situation, it really helps students to be able to work out where the space might be on a court. So here's an example of some of my students playing, and this is where we talked about the next level is, okay, now we're going to add some opposition. So we had 3 against 1, okay, or where was the best place to pass? Who should they pass to? So at this point, we're looking at maintaining possession. We're looking at creating space. We're also looking at regaining possession if you are that one person now against the others. So it's almost like keeping's off or monkey in the middle. I know some people call it, trying to make sure that you're able to pass the ball to within your team without the opposition getting it. If the opposition gets the ball, then that person now, the last person to throw it now becomes the person in the middle. So you can, again, vary the numbers like we talked about before in the change it framework, 2 against 1, 3 against 1, 5 against 2, 6 against 3. It really doesn't matter. The more different sort of scenarios that you put your students in, the better that they're going to be able to solve those problems once they get into a larger form of the game. Okay, layer 5, we're now looking at maintaining possession, regaining possession, creating space, and defending space. Okay, at this point, now we have students competing against each other, trying to score points. So this is a more realistic version of a full level of the game. We've got one team trying to maintain possession, create space to get the ball to their scoring person to score a point. The orange team are trying to regain possession, and they're trying to defend the space by marking. So within that game that we've created, we started at a very, very basic level, just looking at maintaining possession. Then we looked at how we could create space. Then we looked at how we can regain possession. Then we looked at how we can defend space. Now, I went through that really, really quickly. That might happen over the course of maybe 4 to 6 lessons. We're doing different activities, using different equipment. It might not be throwing and catching. It might be now using a soccer ball. It might be using a hockey stick. It might be using lacrosse equipment. It doesn't really matter. Those tactical problems that the students are needing to develop are the same within all of those sports. So being able to maintain possession of a lacrosse ball or a hockey ball or a soccer ball might be different in terms of the skill, but essentially if they're able to do that, then hopefully they can then use their knowledge of creating space or defending space to help them to be successful within those games. So like I said, those skills or those understandings transfer across all of those invasion games. It doesn't really matter what the game is. Essentially, those 4 things that we looked at, being able to maintain possession, create space, regain possession, and defend space, are present within all of those invasion games. It then really just becomes about developing the skills for those games to really sort of help them understand how to play it a little bit better. But once they understand how to play, then they're better able to execute those skills. So sort of as we come to the end, I'm really conscious of time because I know that I've been waffling on for a little while and I want to allow some time for some questions at the end. Really think about the takeaways for today. I think the first thing is to start thinking about moving away from what you're teaching and thinking in terms of games, and start thinking about how the games are going to be played and why it is that the games that you're playing within your lessons are being played. Why are you choosing to play the games you're doing? Is it because you've always played those games, or is it because those games are really well aligned to the curriculum that you're teaching and aligned to the learning outcomes that you're wanting your students to achieve? Explore the teaching games for understanding model and the game sense model. There's plenty of research out there, and there's plenty of websites out there that you can find information about these 2 models. And I would really highly recommend that you go and look at those. Think about tactical complexity in terms of that ladder. So thinking about trying to start your games with a very basic tactical problem. And when students are able to achieve that problem, then adding additional tactical problems and so on and so forth. You to think like a doctor in terms of that diagnose, respond, and evaluate. If you're able to diagnose what's happening in games, why games are working or they're not working, then you're able to respond and create better games. And if you're able to evaluate the changes that you make to the games and you think that it's better, then you're doing a fantastic job there. You can use those 2 frameworks that we talked about, whether it's the problem diagnosis framework or whether it's the change it framework. But essentially, the most important thing is that when you're playing games within your lessons, if it's not working, change it. There's nothing wrong with changing the game. You might think that you have the best game in the world. It's not working for your students, then change it. Happens to me all the time. I can be doing it with my students one day. The next day, we're doing the exact same game. It's not working for some reason. Let's change it. Let's make it more developmentally appropriate for our students. All right, so that was the end of our very, very quick fire first webinar. Our next webinar will be taking place on Friday, the 2nd of June, and the topic is going to be all around physical literacy. I'm really excited to dive into this one. It's something that I've been working really hard to try and understand physical literacy over the past 12 months, and I'm really excited to share my understandings of physical literacy with you out there. Now, if you want to access this webinar, there is a catch. Now, the catch is this. I mentioned earlier about the squad. Now, the squad, as I said, is an online coaching community, and it's going to help me to be able to coach and help me to be able to help you basically through those monthly webinars, one-on-one coaching. So we've set up Skype calls where I can help you with certain things. You're going to get access to those for premium resources and community support. Now, if you want to access next month's webinar, you are going to need to be a member of the squad. The webinars from now on are going to be only available to squad members. Good news for you though, there is a 2-week free trial of the squad. So if you are interested in joining the squad and finding out a little bit about what it's all about, then you can join our 2-week free trial. You can join it. After 2 weeks, you don't enjoy what's happening, you don't feel it's going to be valuable to you, then you can just cancel your membership and leave the squad. I want to give you a little quick sneak peek of the squad while we're here, just so you can see what's happening for the people that are in it right now. So this is our squad. This is our Slack community. And you can see there's about 11 or 12 people in the community right now from all around the world. We've got some people from New Zealand, some people from Hong Kong. We've got some people from Estonia, India, and the US. and we're discussing a lot of different things in here. We have our general discussion where we're talking about lots of stuff. We've got our PE blog section where we all fantastic blog posts out there from different amazing physical education blog posts are being posted here. We've got our resources channel where I'm posting resources. People are posting resources in here all the time that are available for you to use. We've got our squad goals channel where people are talking about what their goals are, and then that helps me to be able to help them and helps people to support each other. And then we've got our webinar channel where this webinar, the replay of this webinar will be posted and will be accessible to all the people in the squad whenever they want to watch it again at any point in time. So that's a very, very quick preview of the squad community. And like I said, we're giving a 2-week free trial for people who are taking part in this webinar. If you're interested in joining the squad or checking it out for a couple of weeks, all you need to do is go to iPhys-Ed.com/join squad, and you will be able to sign up and join the squad and get your 2-week free trial. Now, after the 2-week free trial, there is a cost. It does cost $7 a month, less than the cost of a very overpriced coffee here in Singapore. But if you find it valuable after 2 weeks, I'm sure you will. The people that are in there already have really enjoyed being a part of the squad and have found it really, really helpful. I'm sure that if you get in there and you do this free trial, I'm going to be able to help you. It really comes down to you as well. The more you engage within the community, the more that you engage with me, and the more that I can learn about you within those 2 weeks, the better that I'm going to be able to help you. The better that I'm going to be able to plan those monthly webinars, the better that I'm going to be able to help you with that one-on-one coaching, and to help share resources with you that are going to help you with your development as a physical educator. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to jump out of this. I'm going to go to back to our webinar. I'm going to go down to the offer thing here and turn the offer on. So if you now go to the bottom of your screen and click on offer, you can see there 2-week free trial. All you need to do is click on that link, join squad, and you'll be in and accessing the squad. All right, so I want to now open it up for questions and answers. we've got about 5 minutes left. So if anyone out there right now who is watching, I can see we've got 40 people watching right now, which is fantastic. If anyone out there right now has any questions, feel free to just type them into the chat box there on the side, and I will do my very, very best to answer your questions. All right, so I can see we've got a question here from Thomas. He says, what strategies do you use to balance the pupils who are talented and the pupils who struggle with coordination skills? I feel that I do not have enough time to challenge all ability groups in my class at the same time. Fantastic question. So Thomas, sort of what I was speaking about earlier is about if you have a game that's designed really, really well, that you can have students working within that game at different levels or working using different rules. A really easy example of that might be, okay, volleyball, for example. If you have a student who is highly coordinated and has good skills in volleyball, then maybe they are using the full rules of volleyball, if you want to put it that way, in terms of that they need to hit the ball in a way that you would in a normal game of volleyball. I'm just going to turn my camera on so I can see people as well here for a second. Just give me a moment. Okay, yeah, people can see me now. So yeah, you could have some students working on using the full volleyball rules, but you could have other students who don't have that coordination and that skill using different rules. So they're able to catch the ball, or they're able to throw the ball over, or maybe it's they catch it and then they have to hit it, or whether it's an invasion game where if there's an element of dribbling, say basketball, rather than having those students have to dribble the ball, they can move the ball without dribbling. Like I said, it does take a little bit of time for students to be able to come to terms with the fact that there are different people within the game working under different rules. They will say it's not fair, but the way that I've done it with my students it's taken me a couple of years to get them to a level where they understand it. But essentially, it's just having them understand that, like, if we want this game to be fun for everyone, we want it to be challenging for everyone, we want it to be everyone to be able to be successful within the game, that often we have to have people working at different levels. And that if student A can't dribble the ball and they're not being successful in that, and they're on your team, by enabling them to be able to then be successful within the game, it's helping your team to also be successful. So thinking about how you can vary the rules or the equipment or the strategies or the types of things that are happening within games to enable all students within that game to be able to play the game at the same time, but be successful, or to have it come to their level of skill. So I hope that answers your question, Thomas. Sherry, can you do Pro D and Kamloops since you'll be a BC? I would love to get up to Kamloops and do some Pro D up there. Send me an email or hit me up on Twitter at PE Nathan, or send me an email, Nathan at iPhys-Ed.com, and let's try and set something up. I'd love to get up there and help you out. I'll be arriving in end of June, July, and starting at Meta-Ridge in September. So maybe we can try and set something up for later in the year. I'm going to see if there's any other questions that are going to come up at the moment. I'm just going to give maybe 1 or 2 more minutes to anyone who has any questions. And then if not, we will sign off for today. Remember, at the bottom of the screen there, at the very bottom under here, I think, offers, if you click on that, you can see there a link to get you your 2-week free trial of the squad. So if you're interested in joining that, interested in attending future webinars, like I said, they will only be for squad members. So if you want to see the next webinar or any other of our future webinars, you do need to be a member of that squad. So maybe just 1 more minute to see if anyone has any questions. I'm just taking a look. I can see that we have about 40 people online right now, which is fantastic. I was really, really impressed to see so many people. Join in. You can see Rowan. Thanks, Nathan. You're welcome, Rowan. Of course, yeah, we'll be sharing all this stuff in the squad. Actually, so that's what I mentioned earlier about sharing the resources. All the resources for this webinar will be available on the squad. So if you're interested in getting the resources from this webinar, I'm going to be posting them later today on the squad, and you'll be able to access those. So again, they're there for you if you need them. I want to thank our existing squad members who have joined us for this webinar today. I'll give you a bit of a shout out. So our current squad members, Effie, Jennifer, Kelly, Murray, Nisha, Rick, Rowan, Treen, Will, who am I missing? I think that's about it. Rowan mentioned there. So thank you to those people who have already joined the squad. I'm sure if you are interested, speak to Rowan. He's been a very active participant in the squad so far and has been able to contribute a lot of value to it. So thank you very much, Rowan, for all your contributions so far. I'm super excited to continue to grow with you and the rest of the squad members as we go. So I think I'm going to finish it there. Thank you very, very much for joining in our webinar today. I was so happy to have everyone there, and I really hope that you've been able to take something away from the webinar. If you're watching this on replay, again, thank you for registering and watching the replay. And if you've made it this far, well done. And yeah, feel free just to contact me. Like I mentioned here, let me share my screen again for a second. You can contact me by going to the website, iPhys-Ed.com. There's my Twitter handle at PNathan, or my email address, Nathan at iPhys-Ed.com. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in that 2-week free trial of the squad, either click on the offer button, down there somewhere, down there, offers, or go to iPhys-Ed.com/join squad, and you can join the squad. Thank you very, very much for everyone for joining in. And until our next webinar on June 2nd on physical literacy, I am signing off. Thanks very much and goodbye.